lovely, it's Dr. Erin in the house. Now, today I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea between healthy bonding and trauma bonding, because I was talking to a client about that just this morning and I thought that might be a good idea for a video. So, bonding over trauma is in and of itself not necessarily an unhealthy thing to do, right? The shared experience, the emotions, being able to be vulnerable and authentic, that's all really good, healthy stuff. But if that relationship is not propelling you towards growth and strength finding, and you building yourself up while someone walks along and holds your hand, so to speak, instead of rescuing you, doing all the work for you, keeping you in the vulnerability hangover, then it's not bonding. That's potentially trauma bonding. So in all your different relationships, now this could be like with your partner, at work, particularly if you're working in a setting where you are exposed to traumatic things and there's a lot of venting, complaining, just an unhappy work environment. It could be with your kids, even if they're infants. It could be in groups that you hang out in, Facebook groups that you hang out in. And I think part of this video, the concept behind it, like you're going to see this like water analogy, bear with me. It's kind of around this idea, right, that fish can't see water. So the idea that sometimes when you're in something, you don't see it until someone else points it out to you. So in that way, I hope this is going to be helpful. So healthy bonding, as I said, is more like, for me, the analogy I want to go for, it's like when you're in a kayak, right? So you're steering yourself, you can get yourself to where you need to go, and maybe the person in the kayak relationship with you is just going alongside you. You can reach out, you can hold their hand, they can support you if you need to, but you're in your own lane, you're doing your own thing, you're in control, and there's no rescuing, there's no someone trying to fix stuff for you, and there's no kind of we're doomed kind of vibes, if that kind of makes sense. With trauma bonding, it's a lot more like being in a canoe, I suppose, where you are dependent on another person to help kind of steer you, and you might be going around in circles and getting exhausted and exasperated trying to figure out where you're going and steering. So you're not completely independent in that. You're in it with someone else. But there's a lot of venting, complaining. The relationship might be based on things like impulsivity and gossip and sort of not really a deep connection that's fueled by a desire to see each other grow and build each other up, to see each other in the most whole, beautiful, perfect, complete version of you that exists as a non-linear being who's growing and adapting and is dynamic. But it's maybe you actually want to keep each other small. Maybe actually the only thing that you're bonding over, it's not true connection and desire to see each other be the best versions of yourself. It's actually keeping each other stuck and keeping each other small. And that comes out with things like in romantic relationships, it might be that you actually, the only things that you have going in your relationship are based on heated arguments, this constant push-pull of fight and make up and fight and make up and fight and make up, and there's no real sense of safety and stability. And in some ways there's a lack of authenticity, because when you don't feel safe to be yourself, the wounded ego comes out all the time, and without someone to hold you and go, yep, that's a version of you when you're not feeling your best, and actually all that does is fuel the other person, and you fight or you engage in lots of impulsive, risky behaviors. Or it's sometimes for romantic relationships, people can get stuck in this like, oh, there's no passion if we don't fight. Oh, this clearing of the air. And every couple's different, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. But if the passion in your relationship is actually superficial kind of emotional surface stuff, or it's constant fighting, it's constant bringing each other down, it's constantly keeping each other small and stuck by shared addictions is a really common one for that. So couples who have a shared addiction, there might be different types of addictions, but you're fueling each other in that rather than actually lifting each other up and helping each other grow. So that's kind of an example of that, of being stuck in this canoe where you are dependent on someone else. So some people might refer to that as codependency, and you're stuck and you're not actually doing your own thing and you don't have your own path and your own journey. Now, if you take that water, that's kind of on the surface stuff. If you go even sort of lower than that, the extreme example I'm going to give you is a good extreme example. It's a super rare thing, but it does happen. And I'm giving you this example so that you can work your way back and see where you are. So in clinical psychology, psychiatry, there's this thing called folie à deux. It's a French phrase. It means basically shared psychosis. So you have typically what happens in an insular setting. It might be family groups who are very, very isolated and very insular and don't see anybody outside of that group. Can be in cults, can be in like, I don't know, any sort of setting where there's multiple people. But one person starts with a delusion, with some sort of psychosis. A typical one might be something like, at least in the work with I've seen, like cult survivors and kids in really horrific abusive situations. It might be, for example, one person has the delusion that they're God, and then everybody else in the family or everybody else around them believes that delusion. So it's a shared delusion, and people keep operating on the shared trauma bonding, shared delusion, because again, you're in it and you can't see any deeper. So this is like deep down. This is more like going on a deep dive with someone and your oxygen is running out, and maybe you don't even realize that your oxygen is running out, but you're not going to be able to get out of that situation without some guidance and support from someone outside. Another thing that sometimes happens in families where there's a lot of isolation and severe untreated parental mental illness is that the child will then take on their parents' views of the outside world. So I once worked with a little girl who was eventually rescued, that's not really the right word, taken out of her mum's care because her mum believed in her delusion, kind of really unwell state, that everybody outside of their house were devils and, you know, like everywhere was evil. So she believed she had to keep her daughter inside to keep her safe. So she never interacted with anybody else. And because her daughter, who was tiny, didn't know any different, that's what she believed. So that's a really, really extreme example. And I give you that extreme example, as I said, so you can work back to the idea of trauma bonding. Yes, can be helpful, can be healing. But if the only thing that you are actually bonding over is the shared pain and complaining, venting, negativity, wanting to rescue each other, wanting to be rescued, wanting to just stay in that addictive emotional venting kind of cycle, then it's not compatibility. It's not finding your soulmate. It's not finding your bestie. That's like codependent trauma bonding behavior. So it's a really brief snapshot. I'm happy to go into it more, but it's just to get some cogs turning and see if there are people in your life. As I said, this could be work, romantic relationships, your kids, groups that you're participating in online. If the goal is not building each other up and fueling your growth and fueling your passion and your purpose and getting you further to where you want to be and celebrating you and your strength, that's maybe not bonding. All right, talk to you in the next video.